Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Well, when the Saints wrapped up mandatory minicamp last week, one of the really interesting storylines, of course, was that Alvin Kamara no-showed on the final day, or I should say showed and then left, and then we later learned it's a contract dispute. He effectively has nothing guaranteed beyond 2024, and there's just no chance the Saints are going to pay him $25 million a year from now. So how does this get resolved? Matthew Paras over at NOLA.com has an interesting piece up where he sort of analyzed what the Niners did with Christian McCaffrey, how that could parallel with Alvin Kamara. Matthew Paras, good enough to join us for a couple of minutes here. Hey, man, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We appreciate the time. Let me start with what happened with Kamara leaving. Generally, what was the reaction around Saints minicamp when Kamara left?
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I wasn't actually there on that day. But, just talking to people, there wasn't really a surprise because even though Kamara has 2 years left on his contract, he's basically entering the final year of his deal. He's set to have a $25 million cap hit next year. That's the Saints aren't going to pay him that money, right? They propped up a kind of an end of they ballooned the final year of that deal to make the average seem better than it was when he signed his original contract back in 2020. So that number is kind of just there for salary cap purposes, but there's little chance he actually receives that money. And so with Kamara going into the final year of his deal, he wanted to send a message.
How do you think that message is being received in New Orleans by the organization right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they were surprised. That we reported that they had been talking before this, that they had kind of reached a stalemate, so to say. So, that's in his prerogative to do so. He took a similar measure back in 2020 by skipping a few training camp practices. So he's done something like this before. He was trying to make a statement. I think they heard it, but this is also a pretty disciplined front office with what they want to do financially. They've found ways to be creative. So I think they'll have to find a compromise here if they want to keep Alvin Kamara.
It's interesting, Matthew, to hear you use the term discipline when we talk about the Saints' financial component. But there's some truth to that, right? They're as irresponsible as they are with the way they spend sometimes, when they're committed to a number for a player, they don't budge. I mean, we've seen players like Marcus Williams and Mark Ingram, players that the Saints would love to have had, Trey Hendrickson, but the Saints have their number and they just won't budge off of it. So they are there. So do we know what the Saints would be willing to do, or at least in what ballpark, for Alvin Kamara? We
don't. There are similar deals. Like the point of writing the McCaffrey piece that you mentioned was seeing, all right, how much does this actually set the stage for running backs in their late 20s like Kamara is to get rewarded with a big deal? Does it actually change the market? I talked to a salary cap expert who used to work for the Washington Commanders. He's an NFL agent now. He was a little skeptical. He said the stars kind of have to align for a deal. And, Kamara's situation is pretty different than McCaffrey. Besides the overall production that McCaffrey has that is greater than Kamara, Kamara is really entering kind of a new situation in terms of there's a new offensive staff in place. They want him to show that he can be more productive than he has been. So, for a McCaffrey deal to kind of line up, I don't think it's a one-for-one. But, you look at other deals around the league. The Texans, when they traded for Joe Mixon, they reworked his deal. The Ravens signed Derrick Henry to this offseason to a 2-year, $16 million deal. So you can still make money as a running back almost approaching 30 or in that range, but things have to go just right for you.
Is it fair to say, and Matthew Paras is with us, NOLA.com, is it fair to say that the deals you just mentioned, which seems to be the underlying theme there, is they're all just shorter deals, like maybe a 2-year deal as opposed to some type of long-term extension, which I can't imagine the Saints would entertain a long-term extension for Alvin Kamara at this point.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think it was pretty telling that they didn't touch his original deal this offseason. You know, when they were trying to create cap room to get cap compliant and do, you know, the thing that they do every offseason, they left his contract alone. That gave them flexibility to where if they needed to move on after this season, they could cut him and save almost $19 million. So I think they've reached a point with him where they want to wait and see how he does this upcoming season and you know, see how it goes. But there is some wiggle room in there where if they want to negotiate, maybe you bump up Kamara's pay for this year, you guarantee him some amount of money next year, and everyone calls it a day. But I guess that's just me speculating rather than knowing how it goes.
If you would, you mentioned maybe how Christian McCaffrey's deal might sort of set the market for running backs. At least that's with the cap expert that you talked to spoke. Explain, if you would, because I don't know all the inner workings of the Niners cap, and for our audience, what the Niners did with McCaffrey.
Yeah, so what the Niners did was Christian McCaffrey still had, like Kamara, he was through 2025. So what they did is they added 2 years to that, but then they also gave him some money up front. So they gave him a $4 million raise basically over the next 2 seasons to give him some money and reward his production. But significantly, and I think why it's pretty different, is they gave him $24 million in guarantees. And so, you know, I think if you're Alvin Kamara and you look at that, you would want that. But I just don't think it's a one-for-one parallel for what the Saints are going to do, because $24 million is a big number.
How do you think this situation with Alvin Kamara resolves?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it, but I do think there's some middle ground to be had if both sides want it. You know, where you give maybe Kamara a short-term raise or some small guarantees to encourage him to play this season or to make him happy and give him some guaranteed money for next year, even if he does get cut. Now, I don't know that the Saints aren't under obligation to do any of this stuff. You know, Kamara still, even though he's in the last year of his he's technically in the last year of his contract, but he's still under contract for 2025. So he could. The Saints technically don't have to do anything, but this is also a player that means a lot to their franchise, and I think they generally do right by these sorts of players.
He's on Twitter at Matthew_Paras. It's Paras on Twitter. You want to go give him a follow, NOLA.com. It's going to be interesting as we get closer to camp. One more note. I just saw you tweeted this like 10 minutes ago. The Saints added a cornerback today on top of the safety?
Yes, yeah. Mac McCain, a guy who's really bounced around, and he entered the league as an undrafted free agent in 2021, has had some stints with the Broncos, the Eagles, the Lions, and I think...
he didn't play for the Raiders? Are you kidding me? That's not a guy that didn't play for the Raiders? It's unbelievable.
Yes, I know. Well, Hunter Renfro's still out there, so...
You bite your tongue. Matthew, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the time today, man. We appreciate it.
For sure, man.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.